Hi, I'm Mallory and my sister in a move that still feels like a cruel joke. Wore white to my wedding, then nonchalantly moved into my home and proceeded to steal my husband while letting me believe her child was mine. Now she's back a pathetic figure, soaked in the relentless rain, clutching the boy I raised, whispering that she has nowhere else to go. Ever been betrayed so quietly that the echo was deafening, louder than any scream? Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment because this is family drama you won't soon forget. I used to think the ultimate wedding disaster was a loud objection during the vows, but as I stood there in my ivory gown, clutching my bouquet of blush roses, I realized it wasn't a dramatic outburst that could truly ruin a wedding. It was the subtle shifts, the unspoken cues, the almost imperceptible changes in attention that told you without a single word that the day had somehow ceased to be yours. It began even before the ceremony started. The venue glowed under the soft light of late spring with ivory, linens, blush, roses, and gold accents. Every detail meticulously planned by me, right down to the lilac-scented diffuser in the air. But I hadn't accounted for Serena, my younger sister. She arrived late, stepping out of a black SUV like a Hollywood star, making her grand entrance. She wasn't on the guest list. She had RSVP'd no, claiming she'd broken up with some guy in Boston again and couldn't handle all the love stuff. Yet there she was in a white gown. Not just any white, but bridal white satin off the shoulder with a slit that went practically to her hip. Every inch of it screamed for attention, and infuriatingly she got it. Someone gasped. Someone clapped. One of Ethan's uncles actually leaned over and asked her with a booming laugh, "So you're the bride?" She smiled, all saccharine sweetness and fake humility, and said, "Not today." I stood barely 10 feet away, feeling utterly invisible as my own mother rushed past me to greet Serena, like she was visiting royalty. "You look like a dream," she whispered, then turned to me, adding as a mere afterthought, "Aren't you glad she came, sweetie?" Glad wasn't the emotion churning inside me. When I looked at Ethan for some kind of support, he just gave me a weak, sheepish grin and mumbled, "Guess beauty runs in the family," before turning back to his groomsmen to adjust his tie, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. In the mirror of the bridal suite, I caught a fleeting glimpse of myself and hardly recognized the woman staring back. The veil suddenly felt like a costume, and my carefully practiced smile wouldn't stay put. Behind me reflected faintly in the hallway glass. Serena floated past in her white dress, like the ghost of someone else's wedding. At the altar, my hands trembled as I tried to focus on Ethan's face, but my eyes kept drifting to the side where Serena sat in the front row, dabbing at suspiciously dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. When she posted a photo later, the caption read, "Weddings always bring out the softest parts of me." She wasn't even in the background. She was centered, framed, like the bride. Then came the reception. My maid of honor gave a heartfelt toast. Ethan's best man shared a funny, slightly embarrassing memory, and then uninvited Serena clinked her champagne glass. "I didn't plan to speak, she lied smoothly, "but I just have to say something about love." 6 excruciating minutes. She cried, she laughed. She mentioned Ethan 3 times, me twice, and somehow managed to remind everyone that she was still single and available. "I once told Ethan he was lucky to have Mallory," she said, turning directly to him with a tearful gaze. "And I still think that because she's the best of us." The room actually clapped as if she'd just delivered some profound TED Talk. When it was finally my turn to speak, I barely got halfway through before someone handed Serena a fresh glass of wine, and I watched a cold dread settling in my stomach as half the room turned to look at her instead of me. Even the photographer tilted his expensive lens in her direction. After dinner, I cornered my mother by the elaborate dessert table. She wore white, hijacked the microphone, and now people probably think this is her party. I said, my voice tight with suppressed fury. Mom didn't even blink. Just picked up a delicate cookie. "Mallory," she said, her tone dismissive. "Don't ruin your own big day by being petty." Petty, that was the word she chose. I nodded slowly, a bitter smile twisting my lips, and returned to the throng of guests, thanking people who barely made eye contact. By the time Ethan and I finally reached our honeymoon suite, I felt utterly hollowed out. He fell asleep almost instantly, still humming softly from the open bar. I lay next to him in silence, still in my wedding dress, the weight of the day pressing down on me. I thought about the birthday when Serena accidentally stole my gift, and then cried when I asked for it back. The college recommendation I painstakingly wrote for her that she shamelessly took credit for. The ex-boyfriend she once swore was never serious about me, whom she then dated for months. It was always the same dismissive line afterward. I didn't mean it like that. But this time, she hadn't just borrowed something of mine. She hadn't just made a scene. This time, she had taken something sacred. And that night, as I stared at the ornate ceiling and listened to my husband's steady breathing, understood something I couldn't unlearn. I hadn't been the bride that day. I had been a mere prop in my sister's twisted performance. The room was still shrouded in darkness. When I finally opened my eyes, my wedding gown had been peeled off at some point, folded neatly over a nearby chair. My makeup was half smeared across the silk pillowcase, the other half lingering on my skin like a stubborn reminder that I hadn't fully washed the day off. I reached for Ethan, but the space beside me was cold and empty. I assumed he'd gone for coffee, maybe breakfast. I certainly didn't expect the murmur of voices as I stepped into the hallway. I paused, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. Laughter. 2 voices. One of them his, the other hers. I walked barefoot toward the kitchen. There in the soft glow of the morning light filtering through the window sat Ethan and Serena. She was curled on the couch in a silk robe that looked suspiciously like it wasn't hers, and certainly wasn't mine. Legs tucked beneath her phone in hand. Sipping coffee as if she owned the place. Ethan leaned against the counter, still in his undershirt, holding a second mug. "Hope you don't mind," Serena said brightly when she saw me. Her tone overly casual. "I didn't want to call an Uber so late. Figured it'd be weird to leave right after the wedding. You two looked so peaceful when I peeked in." Before I could even process her bizarre statement, Ethan handed me a mug and kissed the top of my head. "She didn't want to wake us. It's no big deal," he said, his voice a little too quick, a little too dismissive. Maybe it wasn't a big deal that morning, but the next day she was still there. And the day after that, and the one after. She never actually asked if she could stay, never offered a timeline, just kept uttering vague pronouncements like, "I just need a few days to clear my head." And when Ethan shrugged and said with a disconcerting lack of concern, "She's family," I found myself backed into a corner of forced politeness. Our home began to subtly shift. Her overnight bag morphed into a suitcase. Then, too, her hair straightener claimed a permanent spot on my bathroom counter. Her meticulously curated health foods, chia bowls, oat milk designer protein powder, filled an entire shelf in our refrigerator. She set up her laptop at the dining table, turning it into a makeshift shared office space. Every day blurred into the next. I'd come home from a draining day at work to find the TV blaring Serena and Ethan sprawled on the couch, engrossed in some streaming show feed, up sharing my expensive artisanal popcorn. He used to wait for me to start a new series. Now I was the afterthought. They laughed loudly, too loudly, and inside jokes blossomed between them like poisonous weeds after a storm. A line from a movie would spark a fit of giggles I didn't understand. She'd playfully poke his arm, and he'd roll his eyes with an affection that felt deeply wrong. "God, you two are ridiculous," I joked once, trying to inject some normalcy. As I sat down beside them, Serena turned to me, her smile tight, and said, "It's just refreshing to have someone around who actually gets my references." Ethan didn't defend me. He just grinned at the screen. Even dinner changed. I'd often find the dining table untouched, with dirty plates abandoned in the living room instead. They'd eat on the couch, legs crossed, wine glasses in hand, lost in their own little world. One night, I painstakingly cooked chicken marsala, his absolute favorite. They both forgot to come to the table. When I finally reminded them, Serena said with a dismissive wave of her hand, "Oh, we didn't know it was formal." Formal I cleaned up alone that night, the clinking of my silverware against their discarded plates, echoing the growing emptiness inside me. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since the raw heartbreak of college the last time I'd picked up a pen with such desperate intent. I'd been writing to process the pain of a broken heart. Now I wrote to remember to stay tethered to some semblance of sanity. I meticulously recorded dates, times, conversations, Not because anything overtly wrong had happened, but because everything felt profoundly, disturbingly off. One evening, I came downstairs for a glass of water. It was almost midnight, and the kitchen lights were dimly lit. I heard them, Ethan and Serena, talking in low, conspiratorial tones. She was saying something about her last boyfriend. He said I was too much, she whispered, her voice laced with a practiced vulnerability. But I think he just didn't know how to listen. You do, though, Ethan. You really listen. It's like I've known you forever. I didn't walk in. I didn't interrupt. I just stood in the shadows of the hallway, gripping the banister, listening to the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. Later that night, lying beside Ethan in our bed, the silence between us thick and suffocating, I asked, "Do you think she's okay?" He turned toward me, his eyes heavy with what seemed like forced concern. "She's healing, Mal. Don't be too hard on her. She just needs stability right now. Stability in our house, in our bed, taking up our time." I nodded a hollow agreement, but inside I could no longer ignore the truth that had been slowly dawning. The shift wasn't just in the air. It was woven into the very fabric of our routines, our habits, our language. I started to count how many times he said her name versus mine. Our wedding photos remained unopened in a dusty box, while Serena had brazenly taken over the living room wall with her own travel snapshots. Places she hadn't visited in years, but still spoke of as if they were her immediate future. My mother texted me that week, a saccharine message that made my stomach churn. "It's so sweet of you to be there for Serena. She's always needed your strength." Strength. What about my own peace? What about my own space, which was rapidly being eroded? I didn't respond. Because there was no delicate way to articulate, I think my sister is systematically moving into my life and replacing me in my marriage, and I have absolutely no concrete proof, just a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach and the damning weight of countless subtle betrayals. And yet I knew she hadn't left the morning after the wedding because she never intended to. And just like that, the woman who had stolen my spotlight was now steadily stealing my space, and perhaps, devastatingly, even my husband. I don't even remember falling asleep that night, only waking up to the soft, unsettling hum of the refrigerator and the sharp, echoing silence of an empty bed beside me. I rolled over, reaching out instinctively, and felt only cold, unforgiving sheets. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked, 1:47 a.m. I listened intently for footsteps, a creaking door, any sign of life, nothing. Just the low mechanical whisper of our home in the dead of night. I slid out of bed, pulled on my robe, and padded barefoot down the stairs. I told myself I was just going for water, but my chest already knew better. There was a faint glow emanating from the living room, soft and warm, the kind of light people use when they don't want to wake the house or when they want to hide within it. I paused in the hallway just out of sight, half wishing I had imagined the light, but I hadn't. Ethan was on the couch. Sitting beside him, curled up like a contented cat, was Serena. Her eyes were half closed, her lips moving almost imperceptibly, as if whispering something intensely private. Ethan's hand moved gently through her hair, slow, rhythmic, familiar. I stood frozen, the hardwood floor cool beneath my bare feet. His fingers lingered near her scalp, tucking a stray strand behind her ear, with a tenderness that had no place in the space between siblings. Her body leaned into him, not as an innocent accident, not as a sister seeking comfort, but as someone who felt utterly entitled to a closeness that was not hers to claim. It wasn't just the act itself. It was how utterly natural it looked, as if it had happened countless times before. I watched them for 7, maybe 8 agonizing seconds, just long enough to confirm the horrifying truth I had desperately tried to deny. Then I turned around, walked silently back up the stairs, and sat on the edge of my bed, my hands resting uselessly in my lap. Like a child waiting for a punishment she already knew she deserved. I didn't cry. Not then. The next morning, Ethan was already in the kitchen, acting as if he had never left our bed. Serena was there too, of course, wearing one of my old oversized sweatshirts, humming along to the radio, as if she paid the mortgage. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the silence in the room thick and suffocating. Finally, I asked, my voice as casual as I could manage, "Did you two have a late-night heart-to-heart?" Ethan looked up, feigning surprise. She was crying. I was just trying to calm her down. You know how emotional she gets. Serena didn't even blink, just continued spooning Greek yogurt into a delicate glass dish. "Are you jealous of me now? That's new," she said. Her tone laced with a smug amusement that sent a shiver of cold fury down my spine. I laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "No, I'm just curious when comforting your sister-in-law became a midnight routine." Ethan stiffened and Serena actually smirked. "Come on, Mal," he said, his voice tight with irritation. "Don't make this weird." Later that day, I wrote in my journal, "I don't know what's worse, being betrayed or being made to feel insane for sensing it." From then on, I stopped rushing home after work. I took the longest way possible, ran errands I didn't need to run. Started staying up late and sleeping in anything to disrupt the sickening rhythm of their intertwined lives within my own home. I became a ghost in my own house. Serena, on the other hand, seemed to bloom. She started wearing tighter clothes, her gym leggings now a constant part of her daily wardrobe even on days she clearly hadn't set foot in a gym. She lounged around in cropped tank tops that barely covered anything, making a point of stretching languidly right as Ethan walked into the room. He didn't even pretend to look away, and I noticed a subtle yet devastating shift in him. He no longer declined dinner, invitations from my mother, or canceled brunch with our friends. He used to avoid those events like they were a root canal, but now he seemed settled, comfortable, as if this bizarre version of our life, the three of us, was somehow preferable. I dreamed of fire that week, of standing in my own kitchen, staring into the cold silver sink and watching my wedding bouquet go up in flames. I couldn't see who lit the match, but I knew with a chilling certainty who had handed it over. One night, I tentatively asked Ethan if he wanted to take a weekend getaway, just the two of us. He glanced over at the television, then at me, his expression dismissive. "Serena's going through a lot right now. I don't want to leave her alone." "She's a grown woman," I said, my voice flat. He didn't answer. The next day, my journal entry was stark and short. "I married a man who can't tell the difference between kindness and invitation, and a sister who always knew exactly how far she could go without leaving fingerprints." I didn't have concrete proof, no incriminating screenshots, no lipstick on his collar, nothing tangible, but I knew what I had seen, and more importantly, I knew what I felt. It wasn't a sudden explosion of lust. It wasn't even a passionate love affair. It was a slow, insidious erosion, and I was forced to watch it happen, brick by brick, right in the middle of my own home. The morning air felt sharp and cold, even with the windows tightly closed. I sat on the edge of Toby's small bed watching him sleep. His lips were parted slightly, his long lashes resting like delicate commas against his soft cheeks. I used to think he looked so much like Ethan. But lately a disturbing thought had taken root in my mind, and once it did, I couldn't shake it. It was in the subtle curve of his smile. I turned away quickly before anyone could witness the raw hurt that undoubtedly mirrored in my eyes. But of course no one noticed. Not Rami, who was now theatrically posing in front of a flower-laden archway with Dorian's extended family. Not my mother, who hovered nearby, meticulously adjusting someone's boutonniere, as if it were her sole mission in life to ensure the entire day looked picture perfect from every conceivable angle. I passed a cluster of bridesmaids, their laughter echoing through the hallway, none of them even glancing in my direction. My aunt walked right past me, engrossed in a lively conversation about Rami's extravagant honeymoon plans. Nothing, no acknowledging nod, no polite smile. It hit me then with a clarity that sliced through the afternoon's haze. I didn't crave the spotlight. I never had. I simply yearned to be in the picture. I found a quiet corner table near the back patio, pulled out my phone, and began scrolling through my digital gallery. Old photos flickered across the screen. Awkward birthday dinners, forced cheer. Christmas mornings, sterile hospital visits when Dad had been sick, the endless stream of group chats, random screenshots. In every single image I was there, when someone needed something, a ride to the airport at an ungodly hour, a glowing reference letter, a last-minute pickup when someone's car inevitably broke down. But never the center of attention, never celebrated, always the reliable helper, the silent planner, the ever-present shadow. Then came the messages, A text from Mom months ago. Do you mind picking up the cake for Romy's shower? Just say it's from all of us. Another from Romy 2 years prior. Could you send over that tax form again? Dorian's completely confused. And yet another. Are you around this weekend? We could really use help setting up chairs. Every single time I'd shown up quietly, without any fuss or expectation of gratitude. I wasn't a participant in the family's joy. I was merely a convenience, a faceless body that made things run smoother. I blinked hard, willing the stinging sensation behind my eyes to recede. I pulled up the ride-sharing app, my thumb hovering over the request button. I could leave, right now. No one would likely even register my departure. No one would text me tomorrow, genuinely concerned, asking why I'd left. They'd probably just breathe a collective sigh of relief that I hadn't in their eyes made the day about me. But I didn't press it. Instead, I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my purse. Not yet. I stood up slowly, the champagne glass in my hand now empty, my posture straighter, more resolute than it had been all day. If I was going to vanish, it wouldn't be with a quiet, unnoticed fade. Not this time. I wasn't sure what I expected to transpire in the next 10 minutes, but it certainly wasn't this. I'd barely taken 5 steps past the ballroom's threshold when I saw her, Jill Sorrento. We hadn't spoken in over a decade, but I recognized her instantly. The same sharp, no-nonsense bob, the same confident, almost regal posture. She stood by the indoor bar, casually swirling a drink with one hand, her sharp eyes scanning the room with an air of detached amusement, like she was observing a particularly absurd play. When our gazes met, her perfectly arched brows lifted in surprise. "Thana," she questioned, a hint of genuine warmth in her voice. I nodded, unsure whether I should offer a polite smile or simply melt into the ornate wallpaper. But Jill didn't hesitate. She walked straight over and pulled me into a loose, comforting hug, the kind you give when the world around you feels just a little bit off kilter. "I saw everything," she murmured under her breath, her eyes conveying a wealth of unspoken understanding. "You've got the patience of a saint. I would have set this place on fire by now." I exhaled through a stiff smile. "Why give them what they want?" She tilted her head, her gaze sharp and knowing. What do they want for me to finally lose it to become exactly who they've always painted me to be? Difficult, cold, dramatic. I'd rather disappoint them quietly. Jill let out a soft, genuine laugh, then turned more serious, her eyes holding mine. "You always were sharper than the rest of us, Thana. I forgot how incredibly calm you can remain when people truly deserve to be torn limb from limb." Yeah. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, the cacophony of the ballroom swelling around us, the clinking of glasses, someone shouting Romy's name for yet another effusive toast, the laughter that sounded more like a practiced performance than genuine joy. Then Jill added, her voice low and conspiratorial. "You know, Romy once told our whole group back in college that your family heroically pulled her out of a terrible financial mess. Said she was about to lose her apartment and your parents swooped in with this incredible generosity." I didn't say a word at first, but my stomach clenched. I knew exactly which financial mess she was referring to. It was my money. I remembered the phone call as if it had happened yesterday. Romy sobbing hysterically, panicked, claiming her car had broken down on the interstate, that she desperately needed $4,000 for emergency repairs and couldn't possibly wait until payday. She swore she'd pay me back within a month. Without a second thought, I'd wired the money within the hour. She never brought it up again. 2 months later, I'd overheard my mother telling a neighbor in a tone dripping with martyrdom, "We've been supporting Romy through a really tough patch. She's had it so rough, poor thing." As if I didn't exist, as if the significant transfer had never even left my bank account. I looked at Jill and offered a small, strained smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah," I said flatly, "they're incredibly generous like that." She studied me for a long moment, her gaze piercing, then dropped her voice even lower. "Why didn't you ever correct her back then?" "Because what's the point?" I replied, the weariness evident in my tone. When someone has spent years meticulously ensuring that the truth is only ever heard when it flatters them, you learn to stop offering corrections. You start saving your precious energy for things that actually matter. I took a small sip of my lukewarm champagne and glanced around the room. Everyone moved through the party like actors following a well-rehearsed script. The spotlight remained firmly fixed on Rami, her beaming fiancé glued to her side, while my mother orchestrated the entire production with the unwavering precision of a seasoned military general. And yet somehow none of them seemed to notice the quiet unraveling happening at the edges. Jill nudged me gently. "I hope you're not planning on staying much longer." 10 more minutes. I told her the words, feeling like a fragile promise to myself. She looked at me with something akin to concern. "You don't belong here, Thana." I met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable passing between us. "Neither do they." She pulled me in for a brief, warmer hug. "Don't let them shrink you down," she murmured fiercely before walking off toward the coat check. I remained where I was, still breathing in the cloying scent of white roses and overpriced perfume. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed just 3 stark words: "Never again." Then I locked the screen and placed the phone deliberately on the edge of the bar. It didn't feel like a dramatic breakdown. It felt like a quiet, firm promise to myself. A few minutes later, my mother walked by, fussing with a flower arrangement near the overflowing dessert table. She glanced in my direction, didn't offer a wave, didn't manage a strained smile, but this time, I didn't look away. Because the first real crack wasn't in my voice. It was in the way I now saw them. I moved slowly through the hallway, the faint hum of polite conversation trailing behind me like a constant reminder of my outsider status. There was no fiery anger left within me, just a cold, sharp precision. No trembling hands, no shaky breath, just one unwavering thought cutting through the rest. Keep walking. The gift table stood near the reception area, draped in pristine white linen and scattered with an abundance of shimmering bows and ribbons. I hadn't intended to stop, but an invisible force seemed to tug me closer. And then I saw it. A small, elegant silver box adorned with the exact shade of navy blue ribbon I had carefully tied around it. My box. I inched closer as if hypnotized. A small group of women was huddled nearby, admiring something within. "Oh, this is just stunning," one of them gushed. "Leave it to Lorna to have such exquisite taste." "This necklace is beautiful, absolutely timeless," another added. I stepped just far enough to catch a glimpse of the contents. The delicate chain, the single luminous pearl, the exact same necklace I had painstakingly chosen for Rami, its soft gray luster both understated and bold. I vividly remembered the hours I'd spent searching for something meaningful, something that truly represented my feelings. And now, she said her mom got it for her. Another woman chimed in. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I simply stood there, the blood pounding in my ears, a metallic taste coating my tongue. Rami had brazenly taken the heartfelt gift I'd given her, repackaged it, and shamelessly passed it off as a gift from our mother. She had stolen not just the physical object, but the very sentiment behind it, the story itself. My breath steadied and I turned away, heading toward the back patio without uttering a single word. I desperately needed air, a reprieve from the suffocating theater of carefully constructed lies. Before I even reached the door, my phone buzzed insistently, a text message from Dad. "Disappointed in how you've behaved today. Keep it together. Don't start anything." I stared at the terse message, a wave of disbelief washing over me. That's what he chose to say. Not a simple "how are you," not a belated insincere. "Sorry we didn't include you," not even a pathetic "glad you came." Just a stern warning, keep it together because heaven forbid I disrupt their meticulously planned performance. I tightened my grip on my phone and walked outside. The air was crisp and cool against my heated skin, the sky a flawless, mocking blue. A gentle breeze rustled through the nearby trees, a stark contrast to the brewing storm within me. I sank onto a cold concrete bench and opened my banking app. 2 years of financial transactions lay neatly displayed month after agonizing month. Electric bill $200, car repair $887, medical copay $163. One payment after another, some vaguely labeled mom, some dad, and some simply emergency. I scrolled past Christmases where they hadn't even bothered to send a cursory text, yet had no qualms about requesting substantial sums of money. Total $16. cost $275.62. Not once had anyone offered a simple thank you. My thumb hovered over the recurring payments tab. Then I began tapping. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Water, gas, internet, cell phone, all gone. I wasn't consumed by rage. I wasn't even close to tears. I simply knew with a chilling certainty that I was finally irrevocably done. No dramatic memo, no tearful farewell note, no explosive confrontation. Just the quiet, decisive flick of a switch. I sat there for a while, letting the finality of it settle deep within my bones. My life finally felt like my own again. When I walked back inside, the ambient lighting seemed inexplicably warmer, the background music less jarring. Or perhaps it was just my newfound sense of detached clarity. Nobody noticed my return. No one even glanced my way, and for the first time all day, I actually preferred it that way. I drifted past the gift table one last time. The stolen necklace lay nestled in its open box, a stark symbol of something beautiful, twisted and misshapen. But I didn't stop. I picked up another glass of champagne, raising it slightly. Not in a toast, not to join in the forced merriment, but as a quiet reminder to myself, I am still here. And now I was finished asking for a place. I was ready to simply take my own. The clinking of silverware and the vapid chatter of the guests blurred into a dull background hum as I made my way toward the main lawn, where a makeshift stage adorned with delicate white florals had been erected for speeches and staged photos. The sky had deepened to a rich burnished gold, catching the light of the elegant chandeliers strung through the trees. I told myself I'd stay for 10 more minutes. That was the silent agreement I'd made with myself, but I had no way of knowing that those 10 minutes would begin with his voice. Dorian stood beneath the flower-draped archway, tenderly holding Romy's hand, as the enthusiastic MC welcomed him to say a few heartfelt words. The crowd quieted, a sea of phone cameras lifted in anticipation. I remained near the edge, close enough to hear, yet strategically positioned to easily disappear back into the relative anonymity. Then Dorian's eyes scanned the assembled guests and unexpectedly landed on me. He tilted his head slightly, a momentary pause in his confident demeanor, as if trying to place a face that clearly didn't belong in his carefully curated tableau. And then recognition dawned. A slow, almost reverent smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He stepped off the small platform, completely ignoring the microphone the bewildered MC offered, and walked directly toward me. "Hi, boss," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly hushed lawn. Everything stopped. I mean everything. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Forks hovered precariously over plates. One of the violinists even dropped her bow with a soft clatter. It was as if someone had abruptly hit the mute button on the entire scene. I didn't utter a single word. Romy's hand flew to her perfectly glossed mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. The champagne glass she'd been holding slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers and shattered on the brick pathway, the spilled liquid staining the pristine stone like a fresh wound. Lorna's wine glass tipped and rolled off her nearby table, the ruby-red liquid blooming across her pale pink dress like a spreading stain. "You? What did you just say?" Romy finally managed her voice, a strangled whisper that somehow still carried through the stunned silence. Dorian blinked, genuinely confused by the palpable tension. "She's my boss. I transferred to the Boston division 2 weeks ago. She's the COO of the entire biotech division. Didn't she tell you?" Every single pair of eyes swiveled to me. They weren't even looking at each other. They were too busy trying to process this sudden jarring revelation. How the person they had so casually erased had suddenly reappeared, radiating an unexpected gravity. "Shh! Never told us." Lorna stammer ed her voice, a shaky stammer staring at me as if I'd committed some profound, unforgivable act of betrayal against their unspoken social contract. "You never asked," I replied calmly, my voice steady despite the internal tremor of vindication. Frank Romy's boisterous uncle stepped forward, his arms crossed defensively, looking like he was gearing up for a heated confrontation. "So what is this, some kind of performance? Couldn't you just let your sister have her day?" A burning sensation flared in my chest, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. "I came here with a gift. A real one," I stated, my gaze unwavering. You decided it wasn't enough. This is disgusting, Thana. Rami snapped, her face contorted with a mixture of fury and mortification. You planned this, you planned all of it just to ruin me. I felt something crack, but not within me. It was within them. Their carefully constructed facades crumbled. Their faces, moments before flushed with smug certainty, now drained of color or burned with raw, exposed emotion. I didn't plan anything, I said, my voice still even. I came here hoping to be your sister, but apparently that seat was already taken by someone more convenient. Rami shook her head violently, tears welling in her eyes. You don't get to destroy this for me. I turned slowly to face her, meeting her distraught gaze. She was trembling not from fear, but from the dawning realization that she had been standing precariously on a pedestal, built entirely from my years of self-imposed silence. I didn't destroy anything, Romy, I said, my voice low and firm. You already did. Then I turned and walked away, not once looking back. Every step felt like air returning to my starved lungs. The silence I had once dreaded now followed me like an invisible shield of armor. As I neared the edge of the garden, I heard murmurs ripple through the stunned guests. One voice, uncertain and hushed, asked, Wait, is that the sister they always said was in New York? Another, sharper voice replied, No, she's the one Romy never talks about. Good, let them talk. By the time I finally arrived back at my quiet apartment that night, my phone had already begun to buzz incessantly with notifications. I deliberately ignored them. The walk back had been long and strangely cold, even for a spring evening. I hadn't bothered to take off my heels, and I didn't turn on the lights when I stepped inside, just a slow, deliberate exhale. Not because I felt relieved, but because I felt utterly, completely empty. Not drained, not broken, just done. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The city hadn't fully stirred, and neither had I. I unlocked my door, slid my worn bag onto my chair, and opened my laptop. My inbox immediately lit up with a flood of emails. And there it was, right at the top, Dorian's message. Subject, I owe you more than an apology. I ended things with Rami, the email began. Not because of last night, but because I saw something clearly for the first time. I've never respected someone more than I respect you. Thank you for not humiliating me back. Thank you for standing tall. I honestly didn't know people like you existed. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because it was finally quietly enough to simply know that someone had truly seen me, really seen me, and not in spite of who I was, but because of it. That evening, just as I settled onto my comfortable couch with a steaming mug of chamomile tea, my phone vibrated again. Mom. Thana, things got completely out of hand. Can you please help us with the power bill? Your father's trying to fix things. Be the bigger person. There it was again, that infuriating phrase, be the bigger person. Not a single word acknowledging the years of calculated silence, not a shred of recognition for the emotional erasure I had endured. Just another transactional request, as if I were still their invisible daughter turned convenient ATM. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my financial app and scrolled through my accounts. Every single auto payment remained deliberately disabled. I added a concise note to their digital file, refused, not due to inability, but due to repeated disrespect. It felt right. Not triumphant, just unequivocally truthful. There was no satisfaction in the refusal, only a profound sense of quiet peace. Later that night, while brushing my teeth, I overheard my neighbor's television through the thin wall. The familiar drone of an entertainment news segment caught my attention. Rami's name. I leaned closer, straining to hear. She wasn't trending for her engagement anymore. She was trending for the spectacular fallout. Clips from the disastrous event had surfaced online. One in particular, where Dorian clearly calls me boss, in front of dozens of shocked guests, had gone viral. Someone had even unearthed an old press photo from a biotech gala years ago. In a sleek silver evening dress, Dorian, a few respectful steps behind, caught mid-applause. I hadn't posted it. I hadn't even seen it since that night. But now it was everywhere. The internet was predictably divided. Some hailed it as poetic justice. Others labeled me calculated and cold. Some even ludicrously accused me of orchestrating the entire chaotic scene. I didn't respond to any of it. What strangers thought simply didn't hold any weight anymore, because the ones who knew the full painful story had never bothered to ask for it in the first place. My phone vibrated again. This time, a new message from Romy. "Please, can you talk to him for me?" Just this once, I stared at the message for a long moment, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. And then I locked the screen without opening it. Not because I harbored any lingering hatred for her, not even because she didn't deserve my consideration, but because silence has a profound weight that she had never learned to carry. And I was finally resolutely done helping her balance it. By Tuesday, the online noise had begun to subside. But the silence in my own life wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. I spent the day organizing files, catching up with my dedicated team, finalizing crucial reports that had absolutely nothing to do with ill-fated weddings, dysfunctional families, or fleeting viral moments. It felt like finally rinsing off years of accumulated grime that simply didn't belong. And then Sunday came. A hesitant knock echoed at my door. I paused mid-pour of my morning coffee, the rich aroma hanging in the air. When I cautiously checked the peephole, I didn't even flinch. It was them, my parents. My mother clutched a familiar tin of her sugary lemon cookies like it was a fragile peace treaty. My father stood stiffly behind her, his face as rigid as carved stone. I opened the door slowly, my expression carefully neutral. "Hi," I said, offering nothing more. They stepped inside cautiously, as if entering the unfamiliar territory of a stranger's home, which in many ways they were. "We wanted to talk," my mother said softly, placing the tin on my kitchen counter without being invited. "Just as family." I nodded curtly toward the small dining table. No hugs, no forced greetings, just a palpable, unspoken space between us. We sat. My father was the first to break the strained silence. "We raised you for over 30 years, Thana. You didn't get where you are all on your own." I said nothing, simply meeting his gaze steadily. He continued, his tone taking on a familiar note of entitlement. "We're not asking for much. $2,000 a month. That's all. We know you're doing well. You're stable." "Rami, things didn't turn out as planned." My mother chimed in, her voice suddenly syrupy with false concern. "It would mean a lot, honey. Just a little help until things settle down." I waited until they had both finished speaking, fully finished. Then I placed my hands flat on the table and met their expectant eyes. "If Rami matches that exact level of financial support, and if you revise your will to reflect equal standing in my name, then we can talk." My father's face contorted with outrage, as if I had just uttered the most sacrilegious words imaginable. "You're putting conditions on your own parents." He spat, his voice rising in indignation. "I didn't raise my own." "You put conditions on your own daughter a long time ago," I countered, my voice calm but firm. "I just finally learned to read them." His hand slammed down on the table, the sound loud and hollow in the quiet room. My mother's eyes welled up with crocodile tears. "You've changed, Thana," she whispered, her voice laced with wounded accusation. "I've clarified," I corrected gently. They left a few minutes later, muttering under their breath, the untouched tin of sugary lemon cookies still sitting forlornly on my counter. The door clicked shut behind them without so much as an echo. That night I couldn't sleep, not from regret or lingering anger, but from a profound sense of clarity. I scrolled through my old voice memos on my phone, unsure of what I was searching for. And then I found it, an old recording from years ago. My mother's voice, sharp and critical. "If you don't know how to make people feel comfortable, Thana, maybe just don't show up at all." The cruel words hit me harder than I expected. I listened once, then deliberately swiped left and deleted it. Out loud to the silent room, I finally said, "You didn't raise me to be cruel, but you certainly taught me that being kind wouldn't protect me either." I opened my physical photo album, carefully removing the faded childhood image of me and Rami in matching bows. I replaced it with a striking sunset photo taken over the sprawling cityscape during the last biotech summit I had proudly spoken at. I emailed Della, our head of marketing, a brief message. "Thank you for always staying out of the mess and consistently letting my work speak louder than any fabricated narratives." She replied almost instantly with a simple smiley face and a single powerful line. "You never had to prove yourself to us, Thana. You just did." Later that night, Rami messaged me again, her desperation palpable. Please, Thana, he won't answer me. Can you just talk to him? Just this once? I locked my phone without even opening the message. Not because I hated her, not even because she didn't deserve to face the consequences of her actions, but because silence has a significant weight that she had never learned to carry. And I was finally unequivocally done helping her balance it. By Tuesday, the external noise had finally quieted, but the silence in my own life wasn't empty or fraught anymore. It was mine. I spent the day immersed in my work, organizing files, diligently following up with my capable team, finalizing crucial reports that had absolutely nothing to do with disastrous weddings, manipulative families, or fleeting viral moments. It felt like finally rinsing off every last vestige of something that simply didn't belong. And then the following Sunday, a hesitant knock echoed at my door. I paused mid-pour of my morning coffee, the rich, comforting aroma filling the quiet air. When I checked the peephole, I didn't flinch. It was them, my parents. My mother clutched the familiar tin of her sugary lemon cookies like a fragile olive branch. My father stood stiffly behind her, his face an unyielding mask of disapproval. I opened the door slowly, my expression carefully neutral. "Hi," I said, offering nothing more. They stepped inside cautiously, as if entering the unfamiliar territory of a stranger's home, which in many ways they were. "We wanted to talk," my mother said softly, placing the tin on my kitchen counter without being invited. "Just as family." I nodded curtly toward the small dining table. No forced hugs, no insincere greetings, just a palpable, unspoken space between us. We sat. My father was the first to break the strained silence. "We raised you for over 30 years, Thena. You didn't get where you are all on your own." I said nothing, simply meeting his gaze steadily. He continued, his tone taking on a familiar note of entitlement. "We're not asking for much. $2,000 a month. That's all. We know you're doing well. You're stable. Rami, things didn't turn out as planned." My mother chimed in, her voice suddenly syrupy with false concern. "It would mean a lot, honey. Just a little help until things settle down." I waited until they had both finished speaking, fully finished. Then I placed my hands flat on the table and met their expectant eyes. "If Rami matches that exact level of financial support, and if you revise your will to reflect equal standing in my name, then we can talk." My father's face contorted with outrage, as if I had just uttered the most sacrilegious words imaginable. "You're putting conditions on your own parents." He spat, his voice rising in indignation. "I didn't raise my own. You put conditions on your own daughter a long time ago." I countered, my voice calm but firm. "I just finally learned to read them." His hand slammed down on the table, the sound loud and hollow in the quiet room. My mother's eyes welled up with crocodile tears. "You've changed, Thana," she whispered, her voice laced with wounded accusation. "I've clarified," I corrected gently. They left a few minutes later, muttering under their breath, the untouched tin of sugary lemon cookies still sitting forlornly on my counter. The door clicked shut behind them without so much as an echo. That night I couldn't sleep, not from regret or lingering anger, but from a profound sense of clarity. I scrolled through my old voice memos on my phone, unsure of what I was searching for, and then I found it, an old recording from years ago. My mother's voice, sharp and critical. "If you don't know how to make people feel comfortable, Thana, maybe just don't show up at all." The cruel words hit me harder than I expected. I listened once, then deliberately swiped left and deleted it. Out loud to the silent room, I finally said, "You didn't raise me to be cruel, but you certainly taught me that being kind wouldn't protect me either." I opened my physical photo album, carefully removing the faded childhood image of me and Rami in matching bows. I replaced it with a striking sunset photo taken over the sprawling cityscape during the last biotech summit I had proudly spoken at. I emailed Della, our head of marketing, a brief message. "Thank you for always staying out of the mess and consistently letting my work speak louder than any fabricated narratives." She replied almost instantly with a simple smiley face and a single powerful line. "You never had to prove yourself to us, Thana. You just did." Later that night, Rami messaged me again, her desperation palpable. "Please, Thana, he won't answer me. Can you just talk to him just this once?" I locked my phone without even opening the message. Not because I hated her, not even because she didn't deserve to face the consequences of her actions, but because silence has a significant weight that she had never learned to carry. And I was finally resolutely done helping her balance it. I stepped out onto my small porch. The late spring air was chilly but calm. I wrapped a soft blanket around my shoulders, pulled my hair into a loose knot, and sat down alone. Not because no one had invited me to their table, but because I had finally built my own. Sometimes the deepest pain isn't from what was said, but from everything they never bothered to ask. Serafina didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence spoke volumes. What would you do if your own family systematically erased you from their story, only to then shamelessly ask you to fix their own? If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more powerful tales of family dynamics, self-discovery, and the strength it takes to walk away. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Was Thana right to choose silence, or would you have confronted them directly?